This is Nightly Business Report with Tyler Matheson and Sue Herrera.
Big business gathers. CEOs get more face time with the president, while small business feels left out.
United shares slide. Why the airline's public relations debacle is sending investors to the exit row.
And innovation in Iceland. A tiny country may hold the cure to some of the world's most dangerous diseases. Those stories and more tonight on Nightly Business Report for Tuesday, April 11th. And good evening, everyone. I'm Contessa Brewer, in tonight for Sue Herrera.
And welcome, Contessa. Welcome, everyone. I'm Tyler Matheson. In recent days, President Trump has changed his tune on international politics, and now it seems he may be moderating some of his views on the economy. He met again today with some of the nation's top big company CEOs, something he's been doing just about every week since taking office. So is the president listening to his former big company peers on such topics as trade agreements, tariffs, taxes, and more? And what's he getting out of these get-togethers? Kayla Tausche reports from Washington.
For the 13th time in 12 weeks, President Trump summoned executives to the White House today from a variety of industries, including IBM's Ginny Rometty, Pepsi's Endra Nooyi, former GE chief Jack Welch. The Strategic and Policy Forum reconvening to hold more detailed discussions on tax reform, infrastructure, and the president's agenda.
At the top of our agenda is the creation of great high-paying jobs for American workers.
The assembled CEOs at this idea forum represented companies that had less than half their employees in the United States.
I thought the emphasis was around creating jobs and stimulating the economy. Tremendous number of interesting, innovative ideas that came out of this. And I think everyone left with the idea that it was very productive meeting and totally unscripted and totally capable of bringing original, innovative things to the fore.
Some of the executives were looking past the problems with the health care package or the slow nature of tax reform, and were optimistic about the prospects for a bipartisan approach to an infrastructure deal.
I think people want that to happen, Republicans and Democrats, and if we can work out the front end, there's lots of money.
Critics say the talk of pro-business policies, evidenced by CEO visits to the White House, drove equity markets higher for months after the election. That momentum has stalled as Trump's agenda hits legislative roadblocks.
If you go forth, as Trump has consistently done, and say, I'm going to do taxes, I'm going to do health care, I'm going to get rid of Dodd-Frank, if that starts to lack credibility, the dynamics play out very differently, and I really think that that's what we're starting to see.
Schwartzman acknowledged considerable political risk in the market. That's part of the reason why CEOs keep coming back to the White House to get an audience with the president and get as much certainty as possible. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Kayla Tausche, Washington.
While the president met with big business, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson made his way to Russia, and tensions are rising today after White House officials accused Russia of trying to cover up that Syrian chemical weapons attack, the one that spurred last week's U.S. military strike. And separately, North Korea threatened a nuclear strike if provoked by the United States. Following the CEO gathering at the White House, Blackstone CEO Steve Schwartzman said those hotspot issues are top of mind for executives.
The biggest risks to business generally are political risk. When I started as a younger person, that was not the issue. So you actually sit around and try and game this stuff out. And not someone just like me, but it's almost the head of every company.
Meantime, a new survey from the National Federation of Independent Business indicates that small company owners have turned less certain and less optimistic about what the future holds. Kate Rogers explains.
For the second month in a row, small business optimism has taken a hit. The National Federation of Independent Businesses monthly read on Main Street sentiment showed a 0.6-point decline in March to 104.7, but the index is still holding at record levels well above the historical average of 98. Plans to create jobs, make capital outlays, and earnings trends all showed gains in this month's reading, underscoring the idea that optimism is slowly translating into more hiring and spending. But uncertainty among the small business set is also on the rise. The index's uncertainty level had its second highest reading ever, partly to blame gridlock in Washington. The group's chief economist, Bill Dunkelberg, said this could be driven in part by government policy and lack of ability to plan that small business owners have, given the current state of affairs in D.C. President Trump did mention small business today when taking executive action on Dodd-Frank, saying the move would make it easier for small companies to borrow.
We're going to put many millions of people back to work. The banks will be able to lend again. So many people come to see me. I see them all the time, small businesses. They're unable to borrow from banks. They never had a problem 5, 6, 7, 10 years ago. They had great bankers. They had great relationships. Now they can't borrow.
The latest NFIB report shows that may not be the case. In fact, only 4% of owners reported that all of their borrowing needs weren't met, a historically low number. More than half said they didn't want a loan at all. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Kate Rogers.
On Wall Street, stocks closed lower as those geopolitical concerns lingered with investors. Today, the blue chip Dow index fell 6 points. The Nasdaq slipped by 14 points as tech stocks fell for the 8th straight session. And the S&P 500 was off by 3 points. During the trading day, the so-called VIX, or Wall Street's fear gauge that measures volatility, hit its highest level of the year. So how should investors position themselves in an increasingly volatile trading environment? Joining us now to discuss is Michael Farr, president of Farr, Miller & Washington. Michael, good to see you today.
Thank you. Nice to be with you.
So when we're talking about these geopolitical concerns, what happens with North Korea, what happens with Syria, what's the real concern for our investments here in the United States?
Well, when we have a destabilized world, business kind of stops, and we're worried about our trade relationship with China. We're worried about whether the euro is going to fall apart. We're worried about these military conflicts around the world with North Korea or Syria or wherever. Certainly, that can stop business in lots of places around the world, and we are a globally intertwined economic fabric, of course, in 2017. So we do have to worry about what else is going on and the pressures that it can come to bear on our markets.
So what's going to happen, Daddy? Am I going to make money this year or not?
And I think that, yes, you will, or not. I think that's the right answer. Look, we've seen this top called for a long time. It's just this top that won't happen. But where we are right now is the trend remains intact. Market still seems to be biased towards the upside. And I think that fear is continuing to triumph over greed, okay? Sorry, other way around. Greed is continuing to triumph over fear. Greed is winning. People are discounting all of the sort of bad news and risk. So, they kind of dismiss me as saying, oh, he's one of those old guy curmudgeons who just wants to be negative. I'm not. I want to make sure I have money when this thing drops, because it will drop sooner or later. But you've got to stay invested. You've got to know what you own and why you own it. You've got to have good balance sheets. Market's always correct. This could continue to go up. Morgan Stanley said yesterday this could go up another 30%. Maybe it will. Nobody will be any happier than I will be.
A lot of investors are taking an eye to politically and wondering whether Trump's agenda can be accomplished, whether deregulation happens, whether tax reform happens. If you're trying to game this out, are there specific stocks or specific sectors you like, and are there those that you'd like to stay away from?
Yeah, certainly. I think that you have to take a look at the very expensive high flyers and say we probably ought to give them a bit of a wider berth. But if the president's agenda goes forward, certainly energy stocks, we've seen the financial stocks do very well. They've run up a lot, certainly the banks. I think defense stocks probably, and basic materials if we get into a deregulated world. You could take a look, of course, at some of the candidates for more M&A and a less highly regulated world. You see more mergers and acquisitions. I like consumer staples and I like energy. I own a couple of stocks in the consumer staple space. I continue to like CVS, for instance. I like Sprouts Farmers Market. I've mentioned that on your air, I think, before, certainly on CNBC. And they've done okay, but consumer staples certainly haven't done well so far this year. So I like to hit them where they ain't.
I think I may have misunderstood you. Do you think defense stocks have run up too far and you ought to lighten, or that they have more room to run? Very quick.
I think they have more room to run. I would continue to be opportunistic and add.
All right, Michael, thanks. Michael Farr with Farr,
Thank
Miller
you.
and Washington. And still ahead, why Iceland may be the land of opportunity for big pharma.
Iceland is known for its extreme environments, from pockets of geothermal activity like this to its lava fields and volcanoes to dramatic waterfalls. What may be less well known are its contributions to medical research. We tell you how, coming up.
Now an update on the PR debacle at United Airlines. Shares of the company took a hit in today's session as new developments surfaced regarding this video. This footage, as we reported last night, shows a man being dragged down the aisle of his flight by security because he refused to give up his seat. Originally, the airline said the flight was overbooked, but since has backtracked, saying the flight was not technically overbooked. United said it needed the passenger seat to accommodate crew members who needed to be in Louisville the next day for their flights. United CEO Oscar Munoz has issued a few apologies. In the first one, he sent a letter to the airline's employees saying the passenger was disruptive and belligerent. Later, he issued another statement saying no one should ever be mistreated this way. The incident has led many consumers to wonder what their rights are. What does owning an airline ticket really mean? How often are passengers, quote, reaccommodated, to use Oscar Munoz's soothing term? And how many are denied travel involuntarily? Eric Chemi explains.
Dragging someone off a plane might be rare, but involuntary boarding denials happen every day. In 2016, more than 40,000 people out of 650 million passengers were denied boarding against their wishes on all 12 major U.S. airlines, according to the Department of Transportation. Those are people who refused compensation offers in advance and got kicked off anyway. That's 1 out of every 16,000 flyers. A small percentage, but it happens to more than 100 people every day. AirHelp.com says the average compensation for these passengers is about $800. Compare that to the 400,000 people who voluntarily gave up their seats last year. That's almost $1,200 per day. The 12 major U.S. airlines flew 86 million passengers last year. United ranked 5th in involuntary boarding denials. The airlines that were the best at avoiding this problem were Hawaiian, Delta, and Virgin America. The worst? SkyWest, Southwest, and ExpressJet. Delta, recognizing the problem, even lets passengers name their bumping price in advance when they check in online, lowering the odds a passenger will be told not to board. It gives Delta an opportunity to bump those asking for less money instead of wasting time in negotiations at the gate. Overall in the industry, one positive trend has emerged. Compared to 15 years ago, the percentage of people being denied boarding has actually been dropping steadily. But the percentage of involuntarily denied boardings is exactly the same. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Eric Chemi.
So will the debacle at United lead to change for the entire airline industry? Let's get some answers from Julie Ragatz. She's the director for the Center for Ethics at the American College of Financial Services. Ethically speaking, I think that there's a general public consensus that United did not do the right thing here. We heard the CEO own up to that today. Julie, what was the responsibility for United, and what do you think will happen for the entire industry because of what we've seen happen on that flight?
Well, it's good to be with you tonight. I mean, I think that the overall issue is that what we have in this situation is where the passenger has a contract with the airlines, all airlines, that they don't really fully understand until something like this happens. And so whether it was a matter of it being overbooked or whether it was a matter of flight crew necessity or must-need seats, as we found out later, I think the terms of that contract are being made increasingly clear to the American consuming public. It also seems that the public doesn't like those terms very much. So I think what we're probably going to see is a good conversation about whether or not these terms are acceptable to the American public and whether the regulators should get involved.
So how does that play out? In other words, you know, a contract, when I sign my insurance contract, there's a lot of fine print in there that I will never read, and I could probably end up getting bitten by my failure to read it. How much of this really is the problem of the airlines not communicating what these contracts truly say, and perhaps a little sort of willful laziness on the part of travelers?
Well, I think the majority of the responsibility lies with the airlines. I mean, again, most people don't think that this can happen to them. And what this incident did was raise in the consciousness of the American public that this can happen to you. You think you buy a ticket to Florida to go see your family, you may or may not be able to get there. And like your report said, the numbers are low, but people can easily picture themselves in this situation. So like most long, detailed contracts that people don't read, that is in the interest of the companies to not have them read them and not have them look at them too closely. But I think, again, what we're going to see is now that the terms of the contract have been made more obvious, we're going to see some more discussions about whether that's appropriate or not.
Can that happen voluntarily, or will it take rules change like we saw a number of years ago with the rules changing for airlines to say, no, you can't keep passengers on the tarmac for 8 hours without a bathroom, without water and food?
Yeah, well, I hope it happens voluntarily. I think what's happening now, and we've watched this play out over the last couple of days, especially in terms of their stock price going down today, and then, as your reporter mentioned, a series of apologies, increasingly more contrite from the CEO as they recognize the extent of the public's response to this. I think there will be a voluntary acceptance of the changes that will likely be imposed on them by various regulatory agencies. I think that this will be now an industry-wide problem and not just a United problem, and the industry is going to have to respond to it.
Julie Ragatz with the American College of Financial Services. Julie, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
And to Iceland now, a small country with a population of little more than 300,000 people. But its size is one of the things that makes the land of the Vikings a gold mine for genetics research. Meg Terrell has the first part of her series, Modern Medicine, from Reykjavik.
Iceland is a land of extremes, from waterfalls to volcanoes and lava fields to pockets of geothermal activity. But what it's less well known for is that it's a world hub of genetic research.
This population happens to be a population where there is a founder effect, which means that there is a relatively few ancestors that account for a large percentage of current-day population.
Kari Stephenson founded Decode Genetics to mine the unique set of DNA of his countrymen. The founder effect here means that rare genetic variants important in disease show themselves more readily than in more diverse populations.
We have made a large number of discoveries of all kinds of variants in the genome that associate with all kinds of disease, such as schizophrenia, autism, ADHD, heart attack, and the list goes on.
It's not just Iceland's genetics that make it such a goldmine for this kind of work. The country also has pristine genealogy records.
We have 44 kilometers of paper documents, and the oldest document is from 1185 or thereabouts.
Erikur Gudmundsson is director of the National Archives of Iceland, which has a treasure trove of family records going back centuries.
And they are the memory of the nation, and without that we wouldn't know who we are.
Decode worked with the archives and other collections to compile a massive online database of genealogy, which it called the Book of Icelanders. Some, like Gudmundsson, can trace their families back to the 9th century.
Eyvindur Austmaður Bjarnason, he is born 810.
From that database, Decode can study how people with disease are related to one another, and then mine their genetics for what could have caused the illness. And its collection of data is massive.
Inside this giant sub-zero freezer, about 15 degrees below zero to be exact, are stored 500,000 blood samples from half the population of Iceland, about 160,000 people. It represents the past, present, and future of Decode research.
It's a collection of data that appeals to pharmaceutical companies looking for new targets for drug development. In 2012, biotech giant Amgen purchased Decode for more than $400 million. CEO Bob Bradway says the Icelandic company is helping accelerate its work.
One of the things that we know about science and the discovery of new medicines is that it's hard. It's hard, it takes a long time, and it's expensive. One of the things that we find exciting about using human genetics and the clues that provides us is the idea that we can move more quickly and have higher conviction around the new targets that we're exploring.
Already, the companies have announced a new finding, a genetic variant found in Icelanders that appears to protect against heart attack. Amgen is now at work developing a medicine that can mimic this genetic gift.
From this tiny Nordic island country, genetic insights that may help us all. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Meg Terrell in Reykjavik.
And tomorrow night in part 2 of Modern Medicine, Meg explains how companies are capitalizing on the unique properties Iceland has to offer.
Well, if the word manufacturing evokes images of welding and hands-on labor, think again. There's a technology that's changing a lot of that, and it's known as additive manufacturing, or 3D printing. And it's cutting costs and time out of the equation. Morgan Brennan has that story from Whitehall, Michigan.
It's called additive manufacturing, but you probably already know it as 3D printing. Decades in the making, this technology is on the cusp of revolutionizing the way things get made.
For thousands of years, we've been manufacturing components in a very similar way.
Don Larson oversees some 3D printing operations for Arconic, the metal manufacturer formerly known as Alcoa.
This would be a part made by conventional means. The advantage of 3D printing is we start with nothing and we build the part out of a bed of metal powder. And it really opens up the design flexibility of manufacturing the part.
Aerospace is where 3D printing has right now the biggest application. It's the reason Technavio forecasts that 3D printing within the sector will grow by more than 50% each year through 2020.
Aerospace is Arconic's biggest business, and it's using this process to make plane parts for customers like Airbus. Using traditional methods, making a jet engine airfoil would take up to 14 weeks. Using a 3D printing machine, it takes 9 hours. But Arconic is also printing resin pieces for R&D use for traditional manufacturing, cutting the lead time for new products from 52 weeks down to 25.
What's wonderful about Arconic's commitment to digital and to 3D printing is we've been doing this for 20 years.
Mike Pepper, special advisor of advanced technology at Arconic, says the tech is finally becoming reality thanks in part to the digitization of factory floors. And Arconic isn't alone. Additive manufacturing is a focus of every major industrial company right now. From Boeing to GE, Siemens, 3M, Lockheed Martin, and Ford are all using 3D too. Analysts say manufacturers are doubling down.
They see the cost savings, the products are improving in quality and quantity, so it's really a matter of time.
And that time is fast approaching. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Morgan Brennan in Whitehall, Michigan.
That is just astonishing. Coming up, business behind bars, how one prison program is changing life on the inside.
Last night, we told you about a program that teaches prison inmates at San Quentin computer coding skills, even though there's no internet on the inside. Is this just a bunch of Silicon Valley do-gooders trying to help, or has the program really changed lives? Jane Wells followed one graduate in part 2 of her series.
How many cases of water?
It's after 5 p.m. and Kenyatta Leal is still at work inside a San Francisco tech incubator called Rocket Space.
My title here is Manager of Campus Services at Rocket Space.
He's also an ex-con who spent 19 years in some of California's most notorious prisons after drug dealing and armed robbery. The weird thing is, he sometimes goes back to prison voluntarily.
I never thought I'd be saying this, but man, it feels good to be back in prison.
Leal is a graduate of a bold experiment started inside San Quentin called The Last Mile, created by venture capitalist Chris Redlitz and his wife Beverly Parenti. They teach entrepreneurship and coding to inmates to give them job skills which might reduce recidivism and save taxpayers money.
And the truth is that 95% of the people who are incarcerated in our facilities in the United States are coming home. So I ask, who do you want them to be?
There's probably over 5,000 lines of code.
The Last Mile built a fake internet inside the prison for training because no real internet is allowed.
Right, and those are actual metrics.
The program costs taxpayers nothing. It's a joint venture funded by private money and sales of prison products like license plates. Kenyatta Leal was one of its first graduates. He was facing 25 to life, but had earned a college degree behind bars and was taking every prison program available.
I had always had an entrepreneurial spirit. This just seemed like something perfectly suited for me because it gave me an opportunity to guide that entrepreneurial spirit in the right way.
At the same time, his life sentence was shortened when the 3 strikes law changed. Then there was that day in July 2013 when Kenyatta Leal finally walked out of the gates here at San Quentin with 2 things, $200 and hope.
There's nothing I've ever felt in life that felt better or feels better than being released from prison after a life sentence. And I started at Rocket Space. I started off as a paid intern, and I was just doing a bunch of dirty work, grunt work, whatever it took. I mean, I was just game to do whatever, to be successful. And with that mindset, I've been able to work my way up in the company to a management position. And today, I'm the manager of campus services, and I actually hire other formerly incarcerated people to work at Rocket Space.
But the most important thing that I've learned is that if you treat a man as he is, he will remain as he is. But if you treat a man as he can and should be, he will become as he can and should be.
Last month, Leal spoke to the latest class of graduates of the Last Mile inside San Quentin. This is a tough but popular program.
I tried 3 times. I applied before I was actually accepted into the program.
Of the 20 graduates who have left prison,
Evening, gentlemen.
all of them, like Kenyatta Leal, have found jobs, and 0 have returned, except voluntarily.
Looking good, man.
For Nightly Business Report, Jane Wells, San Quentin.
And tomorrow night in part 3 of Jane's series, we'll meet the Warren Buffett of San Quentin.
And that's Nightly Business Report for tonight. I'm Contessa Brewer. Thanks for watching.
I'm Tyler Mathisen. See you tomorrow.